Welcome to Recording in Progress, where we slow things down, and get that progress nice and slow so we can record it, so we can all make a little progress. My name's Larry. With me is Jim.
How's it going?
So I hear we're going to get some new people here tonight. Apparently we have somebody in the chat room who just showed up.
Yeah, he's a new face.
A new face. So we're just going to talk a little bit about what the show's all about.
Well, his avatar doesn't have a face, which is ironic, but yeah, he's technically a new face.
So you're saying his face when there is no face?
Yeah.
So Jim and I, we got to know each other over our common love of trolling, shit posting, and things like that. And Jim started doing a lot of focus on lol cows, autistic, niche libertarian politics, and I've been slowly bringing him into the world of entertainment, podcasting, and pop culture commentary, and the more mainstream culture war stuff. And what was that you were saying about that earlier when we were talking, Jim, before we started the show?
You're basically taking me from one world of lol cows and bringing me to another world of lol cows for me to insult. So there's a whole world of lol cows out there than just ones in the minds of libertarians.
Yep. So we're going to open with a little special lol cow moment. Yeah.
So basically, the whole point of this show is this is a show hosted by libertarians for anybody, even though we don't really touch on libertarian subjects, but we definitely come at it from a libertarian perspective.
Yes.
But we're usually talking about pop culture, movies, music, and a lot of which internet drama stuff. Yeah, and a lot of comics as well. And I don't read comics. You read comics. I read comics vicariously. I have other people read the comics and then tell me the story. I'm not a big fan of the format, but I will read anything that Alan Moore puts out. I will do that. I will suffer through the medium.
I mean, who can't enjoy a weird British wizard, right?
Right.
You know, that was the real mistake of who they should have had for Dumbledore. They should have had Alan Moore do Dumbledore.
That would have worked. That would have worked. Yeah.
So, for those of you who may not know, Laura Loomer is a red hat wearing, right of center, libertarian-ish person who's an internet activist. She apparently worked for Project Veritas for a while, and she started focusing on, and I'm going to quote her from her Patreon, Laura's investigations have uncovered fraud and corruption within the Hillary Clinton campaign, Islamic extremism on college campuses, flaws and loopholes with the U.S. immigration system, and widespread voter fraud throughout the U.S. Laura's investigations have taken her all over the world, but one of her most popular and well-known investigations is the Las Vegas shooting investigation. So Laura kind of is in that whole weird little Breitbart Project Veritas niche of kind of Carnival Barker journalism.
Right. She gets into a lot of snowflakery as well. They have this play that they do in New York all the time, and whoever's president, it basically is represented as Caesar in the play. It was Shakespeare in the Park. And at the end of every show, they end up killing Caesar. Whoever the president is, be it Obama, Clinton, whatever, Bush, they did it for Trump, and she threw a fit and interrupted the show. And there was that. Then you had someone attacked my tire. Do you remember that whole scandal? And it turned out her tire was just old and worn out, and it just snapped. And even Michelin USA, the company that made the tire, has even pointed out, like, no, that's just an old tire. It wasn't slashed. And then there was also the allegations of her being a creepy stalker to men in her office.
No, weird internet political people being weird, creepy stalkers.
Impossible, I know.
So Laura got unpersoned by Twitter, and Twitter refused to say why. And when people said, "Hey, what's the deal? Well, why are you unpersoning me?" They said, "We're not going to tell you, but we're not going to lift the ban." So she decided to do what reasonable people would do: get onto Gab. No. Gab is terrible.
Yeah. I just posted, showing in the tweet, people would rather do this than actually have to use Gab. But what did she do?
So she, like a reasonable person, chained herself to the front door of Twitter. Not both of the front doors, which have been a successful chaining protest.
Right.
Because that would also mean that, like, the fire and the police would have gotten involved. She chained herself to one door, and we're going to play some of the video footage of her protest, because this was apparently like 8, 9, 10 hours. And she, at one point, when asked what she'd have to do if she'd pee, she said, "I'll just pee my pants."
Like a reasonable person would.
So let me know when you're ready for.
I'm on it. We've been doing this long enough. I know the cues.
Goddamn white people are the worst.
I mean, really, white people are the worst. Let's.
All white people. I'm not anti-Semite. I'm anti-termite.
Oh, and did you see that there? Look who I brought in another one of our favorite people in the world, Mr. Alex Jones.
I'm a gay frog.
This is all.
I'm a gay fish.
All of these tweets right here are still on Twitter. I want to shoot Trump in the head. Fuck white people. All white people are racist. God, can someone just shoot Trump already?
All right, like right there. This is one of her tweets. Isn't it ironic how the Twitter moment used to celebrate women, LGBTQ, and minorities is a picture of Ilhan Omar, who is a Somali American who got elected to Congress. She's like an immigrant. Mm-hmm. She's pro-Sharia, pro-female genital mutilation. Under Sharia, homosexuals are oppressed and killed. Women are abused and forced to wear this job. And Farrakhan is anti-Jewish. Oh no, Ilhan is anti-Jewish. And you didn't see that because it kind of went really quick. She had a video of Louis Farrakhan, the screen cap of the picture, talking about Jews being termites.
Jeez.
But my tweet up there, isn't it ironic how the Twitter moments used to celebrate women, LGBTQ, and minorities is a picture of Ilhan Omar. And I had a sign here that I wanted to show you guys, but Twitter confiscated it. So already...
I'm shocked that Twitter was violating her free speech rights on a New York City street. I'm simply shocked. So let's talk for a moment about Gab and why this is actually a more reasonable thing to do than to use Gab as a platform.
I'll let you lead into it. I have my own criticisms too.
So Gab decided, hey, if you're an alt-right edgy boy, you use our social media network platform. In fact, I'm going to post about our current broadcast on Gab right now.
Oh, wow.
See?
That's meta.
That is meta. So it has a terrible interface.
Yeah.
And my Gab post is protesting in front of Twitter HQ is better than using Gab. And they can also share it on Twitter. So not only does Gab want to be the edgy boy platform, like, no, we'll let you use our platform and Twitter at the same time. But it's got a terrible interface. It's got terrible groups of people. Like QAnon. QAnon's a thing there. And traditional lifestyles and the coming European civil wars. Yeah.
So, I mean, I like the idea of something like Gab, something where they're like, we're not going to censor anything unless it's like illegal or like threats, which I guess any form, like if it's, as long as it's not illegal, or copyrighted material because we have to, because our arms are tied. Fine. Like that'd be a great service. But you have to market it right. And I think that they did either intentionally or unintentionally, giving some of their like tweets on Twitter, was probably intentional, is that they waited for people to get banned from Twitter to convince them to come over. Now, the types of people who get banned from Twitter are usually very unsavory. Not always. There's a bunch of good people get banned from there. But the bulk of them...
people like Christopher Cantwell?
Yeah, the good people like Christopher Cantwell, Andrew Anglin, Jared Howe, these types of people who are, if you have ever seen their posts, you would know why they've been banned from various mediums.
Yeah.
I mean, not to say that Twitter's rules with a just thumb. They obviously don't. But they often do ban the right peoples for the right reasons. And then they just went after those people. So what ended up happening is the vast majority of the content that's on Gab is of that. But at the same time, they're trying to market it to like, regular conservatives and libertarians who aren't of that persuasion to come on over. And we come over there, and all we see is Cantwell, Anglin, and Jared Howe, when we're like, I'm going to pass on that.
Also,
I don't want to see this shit in my feed every day.
Because of all the edgy boys, you can't download it on the Google Play Store, so you're like thinking, is this really safe to put on my phone?
Right.
Can I really trust this on my $1,000 piece of electronics that is like a tether that I carry around with me every day of my life?
Yeah, I'm going to pass on that. I'm sure the app is fine, but I think most people have that attitude of
And again, remember what we did last week episode? We were talking about how Tumblr had a little problem with child porn, and they didn't even pull Tumblr off of the App Store for Google over the child porn.
Right.
So that's to give you an idea of how people really think about Gab. It's not good.
Well, child porn, that's not bad. But people saying racist things, that's the true evil of society, right? Kids actually getting exploited and abused, that's all fine. Oh, no, but someone said Orange Man good. We can't have that. Yeah.
Oh, somebody's wanting to know about your opinion on FNet.
That's really deep, esoteric libertarian stuff. So
this
is not the format of the show. Yeah,
we might cover that a little later. Like we might throw a little piece of meat there.
I think I'm going to do a live stream with one of my other friends who likes to talk about this sort of stuff. I think this is going to go kind of. Yeah. You're going to be like, oh, I don't want to deal with this.
But we're going to talk about another excellent example of real life trolling. Hugh Jackman. He told the world, I have a huge announcement on Thursday, and everybody's thinking, oh my god, Wolverine's going to be in the new Avengers movie. It's going to be awesome. Oh my god, there's going to be a new X-Men movie, and Hugh Jackman's going to be in it as Old Man Wolverine. That's awesome. So we're going to the New York Post. Hugh Jackman is ready to retake the stage. Insiders have told Variety that Wolverine actor will revive his one-man stage tour and plans to launch the international tour. On Thursday, the 50-year-old movie star will sing 2 songs at NBC's Today Show and is most likely to make his big announcement about his multi-city concert. While a set list hasn't been planned yet, Jackman will be performing songs from musicals he's been featured in, like Les Mis, Oklahoma, and 2 or 3 pieces from The Greatest Showman, insiders told Variety.
By the way, why is there a picture of a guy who shot himself in the face?
A guy who shot himself in the face?
Yeah, I don't know if you're seeing it.
Oh, I see that.
And then shoots himself in the face, shows the world his new face.
The New York Post makes weird decisions, but that's not actually on my New York Post list. I have Matt Lauer not doing well 1 year after Today firing. Maybe you shouldn't have an office that has secret rape controls.
Yeah, a rape room.
maybe I would feel more sympathetic for you if you didn't have a rape room.
Yeah.
Mom slammed Southwest worker for mocking her daughter's name.
Got that one.
Daughter's name was ABCDE. Just saying, yes, that person deserved mockery, but in a more professional way.
Yeah.
And I have, instead of the guy who shot himself in the face, Democrats responding to Trump's threat to release devastating documents.
So The Greatest Showman, I actually thought was okay. I didn't like the music. I don't know about you. Do you like musicals?
Depends on the musical.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way.
But
I probably like a lot more than you do.
It really depends on the musical.
I was very, very much against musicals until a little musical that I think most people who would watch this would like. It's called South Park Bigger, Longer, Uncut. That qualifies as a musical. It came out, and I remember Matt Stone and Trey Parker were talking about some of the musicals that inspired them, and I was like, oh, maybe this is a thing, and got interested in some Andrew Lloyd Webber stuff, not all of it. Some of it was really bad, and then really got into musicals after that. It's the best thing I've ever seen in my entire life was a musical. Granted, it was also Matt Stone and Trey Parker's The Book of Mormon. But this one was actually pretty good, except for the fact that the music was trying to be like modern pop music rather than like show tunes.
Yeah, it's kind of like what they did with Moulin Rouge. Also, they did that with that Peter Pan prequel, which was a terrible idea, Hook, which I believe that featured Hugh Jackman.
I believe
so. He might have been on
it. Les Mis was terrible. The movie was terrible. But it wasn't because of Hugh Jackman. Really, it was because of Russell Crowe, who had a major role in the movie.
Yeah.
And everybody else did a really good job. Surprisingly, the person who did a really good job and I thought was going to be terrible in it was Sacha Baron Cohen. He actually can sing.
Yeah.
Yeah. He actually was going to play Freddie Mercury. He was going to play that role, and then he ended up walking away from it for probably good reasons.
Yeah. And the next little story on my beat sheet involves one of the internet's favorite people, Neil deGrasse Tyson, who you might know of by his internet nickname, Black Science Man.
Yeah. By the way, so Pathos is like an atheist kind of skeptic site. It's like one of the earlier ones. It's been around.
Yeah. I actually, when I saw this initially, I thought it was completely and totally bogus because of the actual headline. I thought it was a different website that was stealing from Pathos. And that was the part it's like, oh wait, no, this is for real. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, it kind of really does give it credence that they would call out one of their own.
Yeah. So you see, we hear lots of stories about how Judge Kavanaugh was remotely near a 8-girl long chain party at Yale, but we're not seeing the same news coverage of 2 more women accuse Neil deGrasse Tyson of sexual misconduct.
Well, 2 more women. To be fair, I mean, he doesn't hold any real position of power. I think he technically works for government. I don't know what the.
Well, he is Black Science Man. Right. As Black Science Man, people who effing love the science believe everything he says.
Right.
Which is why he's able to lie about people on the internet. He can make up stories about George Bush.
Yeah.
And things that he's been told several times don't happen, but he keeps repeating the story.
And not to mention, anytime a movie comes out, he's always quick to correct the science. I remember when
shut up and enjoy movies, Neil deGrasse Tyson.
There was a the scene in Star Wars, the original Star Wars, where he said, it's the one that made the Kessel Run in 14 parsecs. Yeah. And that was repeated in the newer one, The Force Awakens, and he was like, actually, parsecs are distances, not time.
But again, everybody ignores the fact that legendary actor Alec Guinness looks at him like, "What are you smoking something here?" Yeah. It's one of those things that Alec Guinness threw into the Star Wars performances that shows his quality as an actor. Like, for example, he always acted like Darth Vader. The story that he told in A New Hope to Luke was a lie, because he knew that was what George Lucas was going to do in the second movie. Before George even started writing the second movie, he just knew from his years of experience as an actor, this is the thing that's going to happen. So, 2 more women accused Neil deGrasse Tyson of sexual misconduct. 2 more women, including a fellow astronomer, say Neil deGrasse Tyson is guilty of inappropriate sexual conduct. Dr. Caitlin Allers, Associate Professor of Physics and Astronomy at Bucknell University, told me that she was filled up by Tyson at an after-party following a meeting of the American Astronomical Society in 2009. AAS didn't have a mechanism for reporting sexual harassment at the time, but Dr. Allers says she probably would report the incident if it happened today. So, I'm going to say the following, not in a she had it coming sort of way, but to add context. If you're in a professional association, after your formal meetings, there's a after-party where drinking's involved, sexual things happen. And if you don't know that, somebody who's your mentor and friend should have said, listen, this after party, there's going to be some drinking. There's going to be a little bit of drinking there. Like if you're going to a Comic-Con, it's after all the events, and somebody says, hey, come up to our room, there's going to be some booze that's drank. It's just a thing.
And possibly orgies. You wouldn't believe some of the stories I hear from like these geek nerd related kind of conferences and stuff. They're basically just giant orgies.
Giant orgies.
Yeah, giant nerd orgies.
The second photo shows Tyson grabbing Dr. Allers' arm and looking at her tattoo, which is of the solar system. Immediately after this photo, she says he decided to look for Pluto in her dress.
Oh.
The groping incident allegedly took place at an after-party following the AAS meeting in 2009, which took place in Long Beach. This was according to a lighthearted social event to show astronomers could have fun, according to Dr. Allers. Tyson was there, and he was dancing and drinking, and all that at the party, so a friend and I decided to get pictures with him, she told me. But after the first picture was taken, above left, Tyson decided to explore Dr. Allers' tattoo, a realistic solar system that stretched from her arm to her back and to her collarbone area. I'm just saying, if I'm going to do a tattoo of the solar system, A, I'm not going to do a tattoo, but B, you want to do the whole back, because that way, you have a better canvas to work with.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, admittedly, you don't
show up. Probably end up having to take your whole shirt off to show someone, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
After we had taken the pictures, he noticed my tattoo and kind of grabbed me to look at it and was really obsessed about it, whether I had Pluto on this tattoo or not. And then he looked for Pluto, followed the tattoo into my dress.
Well, you see, clearly this shows that there's some level of misconduct because he was responsible for saying that Pluto wasn't a planet.
Exactly.
Even so he knows it shouldn't have been there.
Even though there have actually been several scientific conferences where people have been trying to get Pluto back as a planet.
Yeah, CJ King says he grabbed her by Uranus.
You see that?
How come we did not see that one coming?
You see, that was why I made the whole back comment. I was hoping you were to say, Uranus. I was dangling that there for you.
Okay. You did the alley-oop, I just didn't notice. Sorry.
Yeah. Dr. Allers said her experience was public and didn't rise to the level of assault, but that it did show that Tyson was capable of some creepy behavior. My experience with him is that he's not someone who has great respect for female body autonomy, she told me in a phone in a prior report. Dr. Allers couldn't have reported the alleged incident to the AAS at the time, even though police exist, and you can report that to police. I mean, yeah. But let's ignore that fact for a moment. But she didn't keep quiet about it either. I confirmed with Dr. Michelle Thornley, an associate professor of physics and astronomy at Buckley, that Dr. Allers told her about Tyson's behavior in 2013 when he was scheduled to speak at the university. Yes, Caitlin spoke to me about her earlier incident. I don't think we discussed exactly what year it happened, but I knew that it was a few years earlier than our conversation about the matter. And blah, 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 blah. Blah, blah, blah. And another allegation. As if this allegation wasn't shocking enough. It came within days of my interview with Ashley Watson, a former assistant to Tyson who said she was forced to quit her job due to his inappropriate sexual advances. Watson worked directly with Tyson for several months. She says that during that time, he put her in uncomfortable situations by attempting to persuade her into sex and demonstrated his predatory tendencies. In hindsight, these red flags that she chose not to pay attention to, Watson told me in an interview. Specifically, Watson said Tyson occasionally made misogynistic comments, that he kept a list of overweight actresses on his phone to prove that women are inhibited by their portrayals in the media when it comes to their health and fitness. Now, let's go back up and look at that picture of Mr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's a big dude. He's a little husky.
For you.
For you. And you can see he's kind of sweaty there. Like, I'm a big guy, and, I would make that comment to people about, if they were making a negative comment about me being fat, but I wouldn't keep the list on my phone. That's a bridge too far for me. Let's see. And, Watson says she's been working directly under Tyson. I like how we use that directly under language there. That's really good. That's some quality journalism. Who called out Trump in 2016 by saying he would grab him by the crotch when they met, and that they got along well. That all changed, however, when he invited me, his underling, to his apartment. Again, I like the use of under there. That's some fine writing. Around 10:30 p.m. to share a bottle of wine and unwind for a couple of hours.
Oh, there we are.
Watson, who said she felt pressure to impress her superstar boss, told me she agreed to come in for a glass of wine instead. So this kind of came out with the Louis C.K. thing. Is in what world does showing up to a man's house and watching him pleasure himself advance your career? I mean, do we know anybody who's actually really gotten career advancement out of being an inappropriate sexual relationship with some fit?
They did do another Wreck-It Ralph movie.
Well, that's true.
But true. Sarah Silverman enjoyed it. She enjoyed it so much that they were like, "Oh, we better bump her up."
So we're gonna move along talking about this black man who is allegedly accused of sexually inappropriate content.
Well, he's not allegedly. He's not allegedly accused. He is accused.
Right. Well,
and he allegedly did these things.
I'm only alleging it because this seems like alleged journalism.
Well,
it's written.
You don't have to say allegedly accused.
I know.
Okay.
He was accused of alleged sexual misconduct.
There we go.
trying to make a comment on the fake news, garbage tier news internet, which is why I actually referencing something on Russia Today, which is the pinnacle of fake news.
So Tolkien was. We should qualify that again. New subscribers who probably aren't familiar with our contention with Russia Today. Briefly, Russia Today is basically a Kremlin propaganda outlet. It's funded by the Kremlin, but they don't own it. Wink, wink.
No. They have a series of steps. It's owned by the state oil company, which is owned by a friend of the government in the name of the government.
But they also receive funding from the Kremlin, if I recall correctly.
It's like communism, but with extra steps.
Yeah. So, and what they do is basically anytime any news article or anything, and not even that, any kind of crank or any kind of fringe person, be it even people that I agree with, says anything bad about anything that's going on in the West, that means like Europe, United States, Canada, they will throw it on there and say, like, look how terrible the United States is. Look how bad Europe is right now. It's terrible. But when the exact same things are happening in Russia, or even worse things are happening in and around Russia, or things that Russia does, it never covers them. Like, I remember the whole Occupy Wall Street thing. They were giving 24-hour coverage for that. But not once did they ever show the protests in, like, St. Petersburg and Moscow. So... And those are pretty huge.
Why would they do that?
Yeah. Well, because everything in Russia is fine. Everyone loves Putin.
Fine. It's fine. It's all just fine.
Right.
So, a science fiction author named Andy Duncan has made some comments about how orcs are problematic and clearly racist. And that J.R.R. Tolkien's racist. So we're just going to... Before we go into the story, we're going to talk about him. He has one novel, 2 collections of short stories, some edited works that are part of an anthology of short stories, and another set of anthology works that are all involving, Southern Gothic horror.
Yeah. And one of his biggest books is a great book, and it's got dungeons and dragons and walking trees and a ring that controls everything. It's a little.
No, you're thinking Tolkien.
Oh, this is not Tolkien. Yeah, this is Tolkien. I thought you were talking about Tolkien.
No, we're talking about the guy right now first who criticized Tolkien.
Oh, I was gonna say, because if you didn't know who Tolkien was, yeah, he wrote a little book. Maybe you'll heard of it. It was called
the Bible.
It's called the Bible. Because you people need to know your literature right. Go on.
And he also starred as the main character in a 1-act play talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
What?
Yeah, so this guy, this is who is going up against J.R.R. Tolkien. Because everything is racist in 2018. A U.S. science fiction writer, even though I don't see any science fiction in his list, I see just Southern Gothic horror, but maybe Russia Today has other books he's written that I don't have access to on Wikipedia.
Well, they are the government. I mean...
Has blasted...
Wink, wink, no, we're not. Wink, wink.
Has blasted J.R.R. Tolkien for his portrayal of orcs in Lord of the Rings. He claimed they were simply misunderstood, comparing them to today's migrants and refugees. In Tolkien's fantasy world, the orcs, described as black-blooded, flesh-eating goblin men, were created by the Dark Lord Morgoth to serve his quest to dominate Middle-earth. Dwelling in caves in the wastes of Mordor, the orcs would eventually serve as foot soldiers of Sauron, a lesser Dark Lord who sought to subject all of Middle-earth's three peoples. Science fiction and fantasy author Andy Duncan, however, thinks this is all a bit problematic. It's hard to miss the repeated notion in Tolkien that some races are just worse than others, or that some people are just worse than others. He told Geek's Guide to the Galaxy, a podcast run by Wired Magazine. You remember back when Wired Magazine used to be something people could be not embarrassed to read?
Yeah. Wired was actually pretty cool back in the day.
I can easily imagine that a lot of these people that were doing the Dark Lord's bidding were doing so out of simple self-preservation and so forth. Even though that's not what the book says. And you know that's not what the book says, you dummy. He added, no, that was me adding some commentary there. He added, ironically, echoing, just following orders defense of the Nazi war criminals who used at Nuremberg. So he's trying to say that it's racist the way orcs were treated, but, oh yeah, the orcs were probably just behaving like the Nazis, so that's fine.
You know what? I'm gonna have to sort of agree, not really, but kind of agree that those books were extremely offensive. I found it offensive that I had to sit through that many books of people walking, so much so that the trees ended up having to walk too.
I'm going to spend the next 5 pages talking about these hills and the qualities of the blades of grass and the sounds they made.
So I'm going to ask a question. Is that worse than 8 pages of telling me why Hank Reardon raised his eyebrow?
No, because Tolkien actually was a good writer.
Okay.
Rather than drive Sauron's armies back from the walls of Minas Tirith with sword and spear, Duncan argues that Gandalf the White, supremacists, and the leaders of men and elves...
Is this real life? Is this really happening right now?
No, admittedly, he did in the original article go into that detail. But Russia Today is they're having some fun with the writing of this.
Hashtag not all orcs.
After all, the orcs probably brought great cuisine and much needed cultural enrichment to Gondor. It's easier to demonize one's opponents than to try and understand them and to understand the complex forces they're leading to. For example, refugees trying to cross the southern U.S. border, legally or illegally. Duncan pontificated, adding, easier to build walls and demonize them as scum.
Oh, God.
Yes, because remember, Orange Man bad.
Yeah. These types of people are going to be first against the wall when the revolution comes.
Yeah. Whereas Donald Trump wants to build a wall, deal with border jumping and rock throwing, the Denthor administration had to contend with armored war trolls and trebuchets raining severed heads down on the Gondor's terrified population. You know what? I know Russia Today is a bad outfit, but whoever's writing this is clearly having a good time.
Wouldn't you if you worked for RT?
Again, Putin, if you're listening, we can work on a fee schedule on how much we can sell out our integrity on. I mean, you got a couple billion lying around. One of those will be fine.
I'm down to do an actual show at your headquarters. Do reporting in progress live on RT. Coming up next, Lee Camp tries to revive the Zeitgeist movement.
Still, if the modern had been around during the War of the Ring, what would they have made of J.R.R. Tolkien's heroes? Last stand against the Orc Court of Mordor. Bigotry, racism, shameless elf supremacy. Bizarrely, Duncan's arguments actually sound like the hashtag orc posting memes, which use the world of Tolkien to mock the modern left, taken at face value. If liberal journalists exist in Middle Earth, the orc posters joke. Surely they would have pointed out that hashtag not all orcs are responsible for the acts of radical orc terrorism.
Oh, no, orcs is a real hashtag. That what came out of this? Orc posting?
No, orc posting was like an actually older thing that came through. But what's great about this argument is J.R.R. Tolkien, because he's a high-class individual, he actually anticipated this argument before it ever happened.
You know what's great about this argument anyway? Is that it's
not an argument?
Yeah.
So we're going to now move on to the rebuttal on Mr. J.R.R. Tolkien.
Oh, was this
video? Moment. Yeah.
Fuck white people.
Fuck white people.
No.
Touche.
Here we go.
Applied to nuclear, the ring, particularly the nuclear bomb, don't they? I think that was in my mind. The whole thing is only an allegory of it. Well, it isn't.
People can, of course, find allegories if they wish to, but as you can see, it was wholly outside his conception of what he was doing in what he called fantasy. The world he created exists for itself and for what it tells you and for what delight it gives you. It may, of course, contain, as indeed it does, elements of his own comprehension, his view of the world at large, but not anything out of the primary world. Just as it contains no specific reference to the Christian religion, it actually contains no specific reference to communism or fascism. Absolutely not. His view of such things, if available at all, will be in solution in the secondary mythical or mythological world that he has created, but not actually itself. Therefore it is in no sense an allegory. The double meaning is not present. Escape is a different question. He was there, perhaps more deeply hostile.
So what Christopher Tolkien, his son, is going into in the commentary is on what influence World War I had on the story of the Lord of the Rings, which Tolkien denied in his lifetime. And J.R.R. Tolkien was also anti-Nazi, anti-racism. So just bear with me here.
Because escape has often been used as a means of attack on the very conception of fantasy, of the secondary world. And he in a sense, he said, of course it is an escape, if you like, because it's a movement out of the primary world, which isn't such a pleasant place, into a secondary world that may not be very much more pleasant, but it's at any rate very different. And there are terrors as well as beauties in the secondary world. But it is not. He said that his critics had chosen the wrong word. He said they were perhaps maliciously confounding the escape of the prisoner with the flight of the deserter. And why should what he offered, if it is escape, not be the escape of the prisoner, which in other contexts is regarded as a very noble thing to try to do?
So Andy Duncan, who got his degree from the University of South Carolina, North Carolina University, and who teaches English at the esteemed institution of Frostburg State University in Frostburg, Maryland. He knows that J.R.R. Tolkien says that there isn't an allegory. Now, that we can get into the whole, death of the author movement in how you examine literature. But at the same point in time, you have a man who has a lifetime of fighting Nazi and racists. He was an anti-fascist. He was an anti-nationalist. Isn't it kind of obscene to say, no, the orcs are all about racism and hating black people?
Wasn't he also a bit of an anarchist, too?
A little bit, yeah. And, he was the kind of person we don't have anymore, really, because we've become a lesser kind of place.
Yeah. Well,
in time.
If he were alive today, he'd be saying Orange Man bad, right? Right, guys? Right.
Orange Man.
Or would he be orc posting?
Yeah. Well, we're gonna move now to something a little bit different. That's also been getting some memes. So it's time to get into the robot Shinji. So do you have any connection to the famous anime Neon Genesis Evangelion?
So I had a friend who went to the public library on my computer and decided to get all of these episodes. And I watched like the first couple of them. And that's not my thing. But then again, anime is not my thing. There's a few animes that I really, really, really enjoy, like but it's usually the classics, like Ninja Scroll, Ghost in the Shell, Akira, like those sorts of things. Like, yeah, I've watched those and I enjoy those. What I've seen of Cowboy Bebop was good. But for the most part, it's like, it just doesn't interest me at all. It just really doesn't. Not even Dragon Ball Z. I would never got into that either. So we may have to go through a little process. He watched them. I did not. But I'm very. I wouldn't say very, but I'm tuned in well enough to the memes, especially the very end scene, and a lot of the kind of people who think that it has like some kind of deeper meanings and stuff. And
it does, but the author has decided to say no, it doesn't.
Yeah, and that's how we get into the whole death of the author thing that you brought up earlier. I know that was one of the big things that did was bring that kind of issue to the forefront.
Yeah, and so Netflix made a big deal with Gainax, which was one of the major anime producing companies, but they've fallen by the wayside. And Japan, when it comes for producing companies for anime, it's kind of weird. Companies will get big and hot and fade out. There are very few big dog players. And so Gainax made Neon Genesis Evangelion, which was, I hate to use these words, but it was a deconstruction giant robot genre. And focusing on the genre tropes to tell a deeper, more meaningful story. And at some point, once it comes out in 2019, we at the very least need to do a watch and recap on End of Evangelion. Because End of Evangelion is special.
Yeah. Congratulations, you figured it out.
So End of Evangelion is
congratulations.
Congratulations. So End of Evangelion was a remake of those 2 episodes that were not made the way that the producers originally intended because they didn't have any budget. But Evangelion became hugely popular, especially in the United States. So, yeah, that's a big thing, and a lot of anime fans are pretty happy about that. But while everybody's focusing on Evangelion, there's some other gems in the Gainax catalog that we may get to see, and we may see get turned into a live-action remake. Such as, also useful for memes, Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, Roro Fight the Power. Do the Impossible, Break the Unbreakable. It may be coming back. I don't think they'll be bringing back Fooly Cooly, but that's because it gets kind of weird with Studio IG as well as Cartoon Network. We also have, of course, Pantheon Stocking with Garter Belt, which is kind of weird. But, we have, let's see what else was the other one in here. Stood out. Shikabane Hime. Imagine, if you will, that you were a young boy raised by a Buddhist monk who has a hot girl who's a zombie, who he goes around and fights monsters with. And then the monsters kill him, and then you have the girl as your little zombie hot girl Pokemon. But you also fall in love with her. That's a thing that we may be seeing soon to Netflix. Automatic Maiden, a Battle Maid anime. I'm not sure though that we've quite gotten deep enough on anime for America to want a Battle Maid anime being a big thing. Appleseed, which is another classic, which I wouldn't be surprised if they made a live action version of. So Appleseed is one of these weird genre of animes where it's a post-apocalyptic world, but out of the ashes, there's a technological utopia that's founded by Japan, because of course there is.
Why wouldn't there be?
But it's not a real utopia. There's always a problem, because utopia means no such place. Look that up on the internet, kids. It means no such place. It means there's nothing that's perfect in this world. So we have some other good shows that could be coming into a Netflix near you. See, and we got some older shows here. I'm just seeing if any of them are
provided that Netflix. Or are you talking about? Is Netflix remaking them or just putting them on their streaming?
Well, they have the rights to stream them now. I think Shikabane Hime would definitely be a good decision if they can get Gurren Lagann. If that's a clean right, they should also do that. Shikabane Hime is kind of niche, and I actually think that would be a good one for them to do in like a Netflix season of. Because Netflix has actually done a pretty good job of making their own seasons of things. Also, another classic, Magical Shopping Arcade of Benabashi, which is about 2 kids who live in basically a flea market. But the flea market has portals to other dimensions.
Now, I've seen this girl before, the one that's on the Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann.
Gurren Lagann. Gurren Lagann. That was a big show on Adult Swim.
Yeah, I have a Twitter. I don't know if he still follows me on Twitter, but I know on Facebook, back when I still used Facebook, he was like obsessed with the girl with the little skull in her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those
I think that was actually his waifu, come to think of it. Yeah. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. So those are some of the things we're maybe seeing coming soon to Netflix. So that's a real positive for anime fans coming out of Netflix. But we have something else that's like, oh no. Now, if I had timed this right, I would have put in another clip of "Fuck White People."
So, first and foremost, before we get going, if I sound very weird in this video, it's because it randomly dropped into the fucking 40s, and I am in no way, shape, or form built for this weather. I am used to 105, 110 with fucking, you know, like 80, 90%.
But you see right there, Cowboy Bebop live action series.
Humidity. This weather and me do not mix. But either way, I did a live stream about to go ahead and put out not just a Devil May Cry series with is his name, I can't remember his first name, 80 or Avi Shankar, the guy who did Castlevania, Punisher, Dirty Laundry.
Okay, everybody who does YouTubes, who we're playing clips of, can you all get to the point quicker?
Yeah.
Please.
Evangelion on, and so they were scoring some points. Okay, Netflix is making up for that bullshit that was the She-Ra series. But now they went ahead and took all that good faith that they built up, and they just put it right in the toilet and flushed it until the floor was flooded when they announced a live-action Cowboy Bebop adaptation.
So what happened is they made a Death Note.
I thought you were going to say what happened was this guy's been listening to too many British YouTubers. That's why it took him too long to get to the point.
Yeah. Well, what happened is obviously because that does depend on the child.
Yeah, me, an intellectual. Never Jesus side.
Everybody remembers how there was the Death Note anime, and everybody thought, oh, wow, you're going to have Willem Dafoe play one of the Shinigami. That's going to be really cool. That's going to be really interesting. Because, you know, he's automatically spooky because he's William Dafoe. And then they set it in Seattle, which is terrible. No offense to anybody who lives in Seattle. I have dear friends who live in Seattle, but it's not an interesting place. It's a place that pretends to be interesting. And the really smart detective character, we're going to make him some weird black kid. Who's like a black kid but also emo for some reason, because the original character was emo. And we don't want to talk about how that creates different social contexts, and also how he's working as part of an international police task force. And again, we don't want to talk about how that racial difference creates differences in how people are going to perceive the show. So the big thing people are worried about is they're going to do race changing and all that, but that's not actually going to be the real problem. They have, like, the guy who created Cowboy Bebop, he's going to be a creative consultant, which means either he's going to help them or we've hired you to make the fans happy. But let me make some predictions. They're going to get a East Asian actress, particularly one from Singapore, Malaysia, if they can swing it to play Faye Valentine. They're going to get a Hispanic or Turkish girl to play Ed, because Ed was either Hispanic or Turkish. They're going to have a black guy play Jet Black, because of course they are. Don't be ridiculous. Even though Dave Bautista actually would be kind of interesting in that part, I think. But they would have to help him learn to act better. And they're going to get some kind of weirdly Jewish guy to play Spike. And that's actually pretty close to what their races are on the show. Except for switching Jet, and I don't think anybody's going to care about that. The real problem is Cowboy Bebop isn't really about the characters or the stories. That's why, other than like 4 episodes, you can watch the episodes in any order, and it, you know, makes as much sense. It's all about how all the instances and things interplay with each other. And Netflix is showing that they don't really care that much about that. It's all about, can you get something people will want to watch, even if it's to hate watch it, so that we can up our eyeballs and sell our service. So what do you think about the future of Cowboy Bebop, the live-action television anime experience?
I'm not too familiar with Cowboy Bebop, but if it does come out with the live-action version, I may be inclined to watch it.
I'm probably going to watch it, because I think it could be converted well if they actually give a shit.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think the thing that deters me most from wanting to watch anime are fans of anime.
Well, fans of anything are terrible, and they're the worst part of anything.
And enthusiasts are the one group of people that'll dissuade most people from getting enjoyed. It's kind of like when you first find out about good beer, and then you want all your Bud Light drinking friends to try an IPA, and then they never want to touch it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like one of those things. Yeah.
But I mean, it's also like, we were talking about the weird niche little libertarian things, like, everybody gets angry, when you're a libertarian. It's like, oh no, that guy, he's totally learned about libertarianism for the first time, and he's going to be super awkward and uncomfortable about that. Oh. But, at least with all their anger and passion, they at least believe in something. They at least are interested in something. Let's talk about something that nobody was interested in, the Murphy Brown reboot.
I thought you were going to say Robin Hood.
Oh, no. We're going to get to Robin Hood.
Right.
That has something of value to it. Murphy Brown, Happy Together, to end after an initial order on CBS.
So what is Happy Together? This is completely... I know what Murphy Brown is.
That's another show. That's another show that also got canceled because nobody watched it. As CBS continues to solidify its mid-season lineup, actually, let me pull that up. Just so we can have that context together. At least, because Murphy Brown is something you remember that being a thing.
I remember being a little kid and seeing advertisement for it, like before and after and during the commercial breaks for shows that I did want to watch.
Yeah, all I remember so Happy Together I think was a TV show starring Damon Wayans Jr.
Oh, yeah.
It follows Jake and Claire, a 30-something couple who are tired of their mundane life and decide to reconnect with their younger, cooler selves when an emerging pop star who is drawn to their supernormal suburban life moves in.
Okay.
That just sounds painful.
You already lost me at Damon Wayans.
No, Damon Wayans Jr. This was supposed to help make him a big star.
I lost interest in anything Wayans brothers long ago.
Murphy Brown, the rebooted series, was always intended to be a closed-ended order of 13 episodes, which is a lie. It's a good lie to tell. It's like, hey, listen, we only intended this to be one crappy season that nobody watched, and we were successful. The multi-camera comedy featuring the return of star Candice Bergen and original creator Diane English has underperformed. 6.2 million total views and a 0.9 in the key 18 to 49 demo. 0.9. And in the prime Thursday at 9:30 p.m. slot and remains in consideration for renewal. Fellow multi-game comedy fame starring blah blah blah. So Murphy Brown was all about how we need to have more serious journalism in the age of Orange Man Bad. And nobody wanted to watch about some old lady journalist who people remembered because Dan Quayle got upset about her baby. And how her baby was, gonna ruin America.
So what you're saying is Murphy Brown is still as irrelevant as Dan Quayle?
No. Because Dan Quayle's not made a political comeback. That was like 2000. But she's part of the wave of comedians who want to tell us how they know better than us because Orange Man Bad. And we're going to talk about The Atlantic, a magazine that used to sell itself as a right-wing outlet. How comedians became public intellectuals. People looked to Amy Schumer and her fellow jokesters not just to make fun of the world, but to make sense of it and maybe even help fix it. So let's just digest that for a moment. I don't know anybody who's stupid enough to have said, that Amy Schumer really has it going on with her thoughts on politics to me.
Never.
But Jim, I can't imagine anybody I actually know who would say that statement if they knew I wasn't around to laugh at them. Is that similar to your personal vantage point here?
I don't know anybody who likes Amy Schumer.
No.
I mean, I know I talk to people who would be in her target demo who tell me she's terrible. Like
because she is terrible.
Female comedians are so underrated, and they get a bad rap, and they're underperformed. Well, Amy Schumer, okay, yeah, she's bad, but there's other ones that are good.
This week, in her much-anticipated sketch on her Comedy Central show, Amy Schumer staged a trial of Bill Cosby in the court of public opinion. Because nothing says hot, edgy comedy like a trial of a octogenarian who's actually going to jail eventually for rape. Schumer, her character at any rate, played the role of the defense. Let's remind ourselves what's at stake here, she argued to the jury. If convicted, the next time you put on a rerun of The Cosby Show, you may wince a little, you might feel a little pang, and none of us deserve that. We don't deserve to feel that pang. That's some top-notch comedy there. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, Bill Cosby, I didn't believe him when the first woman made herself public and the second and the third, but by the time we got into multiple digits, I'm saying, okay, he probably raped some people. I'm just saying, when you count the number of women accusing you of rape in the tens, you've probably raped at least one of those women.
At least, yeah.
And
where there's smoke, it's not often there's fire. It could just be a cigarette.
It could be.
But when you have plumes of smoke bellowing out of your window, there's a fire.
Yeah. So her conclusion, we deserve to dance like no one's watching and watch no one's raping. Oof. This is the kind of thing that Inside Amy Schumer referred to as the most feminist show on television.
Did The Atlantic really type out oof? Is this happening in current year?
This is happening in current year. And her acting general called a phase that reveals as much about her craft as about Schumer herself. Comedy with a message, but while Schumer's work is operating at the vanguard, popular comedy is also in line with the work being done by her fellow performers, jokes that tend to treat humor not just as an end to itself, but as a vehicle for making a point. Watch like no one's raping. I didn't realize that Amy Schumer was such a deep public intellectual. Let's see. We get into Key and Peele. So is the work of Key and Peele, who make productive fun of racial politics, of Abby Jacobson and Ilana Gazer, who make fun of the culture that's obsessed at various levels with ingenuousness, with authenticity. You mean like this article that says that Amy Schumer is a
public intellectual?
It's a public intellectual that's not ingenuous, not in the least. It's Sarah Silverman, who makes fun of religion and also makes pro-Nazi statements, even though she's a Jew. Anna Patton Oswalt, who makes fun of civilization. And Louis C.K., who makes fun of himself and also masturbates in front of people because he gets off on that. And Nick Cole, who explored the deep cultural influences of reality TV. And Stephen Colbert, who used to be funny when he was
a satirist. He's a satirist. He doesn't really work out as a comedian properly.
But. Yeah. And of Jon Stewart and John Oliver and Larry Wilmore, who all edit footage to make themselves look smart and smarmy when they're just smarmy.
Yeah. So, I guess before we move on, I just want to play a quick segment of a song that's highly related to this article that shows that these wonderful comedians are really just brilliant public intellectuals.
Okay. Let's hear it.
It's playing, but you can't hear it. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but it's beautiful.
Me, an intellectual, I never pick a side. Nothing ever.
Oh, wait. It gets even better.
Okay. That's a long play.
That Foreign Policy magazine listed Stephen Colbert as one of the influential public intellectuals.
Wow. Was he the person that said Orange Man bad the most?
This was actually before Orange Man bad. This was back when Obama was, healing the planet and causing the sea levels to lower and the planet's temperature to go down.
Well, back then, Jon Stewart was still running The Daily Show. And The Daily Show was the most popular news show.
quote unquote.
Yeah, but no, he's not really providing the news, okay? The show that leads into his is puppets making prank phone calls. He's just for jokes, guys. And then of course,
the guy who did the puppets making prank phone calls cries about Orange Man being bad on TV.
Yeah. I ended up watching someone was linking in my Discord server a bunch of Tucker Carlson stuff. And I actually went back and watched. I remember when the Crossfire thing happened. I was actually watching it live when it happened. Oh, you.
I accidentally hit the button a little too quickly.
Okay. And I went back and watched it again, and I was like, this did not age well, considering that most of what Jon Stewart says, he later kind of disregarded. And I've seen him do interviews where he has been hostile to his interviewees, especially the New York Times journalist who made a case for the Iraq War, and he grilled her, and he tries to fancy himself a bit of a really serious journalist while at the same time poking fun at the news, being funny about it. So it's kind of like, okay, you may have quote unquote won the debate, but it wasn't true.
Yep.
It turned out to be all not true, everything that you said. Yeah.
And ironically enough, we're going to talk a little bit about Doctor Who and the Witchfinders, which is all about a little bit of a witch hunt, and it's part of the lurching into the turlet for Doctor Who.
And shall be tried by
that is quiet.
Stool, hewn from the mightiest tree on Pendle Hill. If you drown, you are innocent. If you survive, you are a witch.
Meet me on the other side.
So much for not interfering.
Who dares interfere with this trial? 35 witches we have tried, and still Satan surrounds us. We shall not be stopped.
Doctor, we're here.
You will be punished for your interference. The trials are sacred. They are the will of God.
Is she alive? I'm sorry.
Come back to London with me, Ryan. Be my protector.
So, okay, for those of you who don't know your English history, King James I was a little gay.
I mean, it's a kind offer, sire, but, you know, I've got stuff to do.
It's my pricker. Now, we can have some fun. Eh, Ryan? You'll wonder, how does it work?
It's got 3 settings.
Satan.
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 What's Satan?
Satan.
Book of Satan. Satan's
Lucifer. Agent of Satan. Satan.
It's Satan. Satan.
Satan. Agents of Satan, even in the face of witchery. A woman.
Set a woman to catch a woman.
Hold your tongue, lassie.
Even if I am just a woman.
Woman who...
What woman?
These are hard times for women. If we're not being drowned, we're being patronised to death. Honestly, if I was still a bloke, I could get on with the job and not have to waste time defending myself.
Oh,
Of course, as a woman, you don't get to have pockets for a while yet.
To silence foolish women who talk too much.
Wasn't it? Doubt it. Not a big believer in Satan.
No, the actual Doctor Who episode where Satan appeared, they used the name Satan once and devil 7 times. Again, Satan was actually in the episode.
I didn't ask. Have you got any sort of faith?
Not really. It's brought up neoclassic, congregational. Because my mum, she was my old mum. What about you?
I believe I haven't seen everything, I don't know. It's funny, isn't it? You think you make out the rules. That thing that said it came from beyond the universe, I'd believe it, but before the universe, impossible. Doesn't fit my rule. Still, that's why I keep travelling. to be proved wrong. Thank you, Ida.
Don't go.
Hello. Welcome.
So, we're going to talk a little bit about Doctor Who, and finally, they decided to have an episode all where Doctor Who complains about not having herself be respected as a woman. Mm-hmm. I'm pleased that they did it almost towards the end of the season, so they figured they would lose everybody with the more boring and unfocused episodes. So by this point in time, they're saying, yeah, we can get into the gender politics. So Doctor Who goes into a English village, and there were brief period of time in which King James got a little paranoid and said witches were out to get him, and so a whole bunch of people got killed. Historically, the witch hunts are a thing we all like to believe happened, but there's very little historical evidence that they happened, and what credible historical evidence we have shows large-scale, the church, when people were saying, hey, these people are witches, the church tribunals were saying, no, you're dumb. Go away. This is stupid. Stop wasting our time. And when they did have panels of people killing witches, they were usually run by the government.
Like the Salem witch trials?
Exactly. Okay. But those were actually not very common. And the only areas where people who were accused of practicing black, dark, diabolic arts were killed in large-scale numbers, they tend to be areas in Northern and Eastern Europe, like Russia, surprise, surprise, and Iceland, where they tend to be men. And those are not things people who talk about witch hunting crazes really focus on. And because Doctor Who's a science fiction show, even when they have Satan, it's not really Satan, it's not magic. Satan's just a super advanced alien who everybody believes to be Satan. Ancient Egyptian gods, super advanced alien.
And me as a Satanist find that very offensive.
Exactly. So instead, it was evil mud. Evil mud aliens were imprisoned underneath a hill, and this magic tree, same one that was used to dunk witches, was used to keep them in prison. And the head of the witch hunt was using the magic tree to inject the mud aliens into women and kill them. But it didn't work because she couldn't inject the mud aliens into Doctor Who. She figured it out, and eventually they stopped everything. She got mad at King James because he killed one of the mud aliens that was trying to murder people. Again, the hero of this science info educational show got mad at somebody for killing an alien who wanted to murder people. This kind of loops back into the orc thing. What exactly do they want out of our popular culture, in our media, our heroes? There are people who are out there who want to kill you. So it's time that we kill them back. Or at least, make it clear that, hey, killing you back, that's an option. And that's an option we should consider.
Let me just say that I'm glad I didn't pay for my TV license this year.
Oh, wait, we don't have to pay for our TV license because we live in a free country.
Oh, right. Forgot
about that. Well, I mean, free relative to the United Kingdom. We're not having people reporting us to the police for our Facebook posts while people are getting shot and stabbed and raped.
Yeah. But
so let's do a little palate cleanser, a little change, and start to lead into your review.
Okay.
Robin Hood bombs at the box office, earns $22 million on a $100 million budget.
Yeah. I can see why.
Lionsgate's new film adaptation of the classic Robin Hood story misses the mark, earning $22 million just from the opening weekend. Worldwide on a budget of about $100 million, as much as Hollywood loves pumping out sequels to prove the franchise. Another thing it loves almost as much is adapting stories from the public domain. There's a reason things like Shakespeare plays, books like Frankenstein and Dracula, and character from folklore like Robin Hood tend to get made into movies over and over again. Studios don't have to pay the license and story rights, and everybody knows the property. So, Jim, tell us a little bit about Robin Hood, yet another movie.
Yet another Robin Hood movie, which is right now Rotten Tomatoes score 16%. Rating, but the audience score is 49, which is still rotten. I went into this thinking that it was going to be a steampunk shit show, and was pleasantly surprised. Now remember, because I had low expectations, I actually came out of the movie like happy. It was okay. I was actually.
But just remember, like Dewey from Malcolm in the Middle, you can always expect nothing and still be disappointed.
Right.
So low expectations is not protection.
Right. But I thought it was going to be a shit show because I really wanted to come here and give a bad TV. We all love when people do bad reviews of things, when things get bad reviews. My favorite reviews for, I don't know, movies or whiskeys or beers or whatever, has always been negative reviews where people just fucking hate it. Like the Chris Stuckman when he reviewed the Emoji Movie. Those are the best reviews ever. Or when I did a review of the My Little Pony, Friendship Isn't Magic movie in my car, and I was screaming at the top of my lungs about how much I hated that movie. This I didn't hate. I actually thought it was okay. But then again, it's a story that I've heard a billion jillion times, and I didn't get any of the things that I was hoping weren't going to be in it. So I guess that was a good thing. I don't know how the
what
trailer.
Was the movie about?
Robin Hood.
What was the movie about?
Robin Hood. You know the story. It's been told a billion trillion times.
So let me give you a little bit of a homework assignment. There's a book called Save the Cat.
Okay.
So Save the Cat is an influential book of screenwriting, and it's very helpful for you when you're reviewing movies or watching movies or thinking about movies. There are 15 beats, typically. And I'm going to use one from a Blake Snyder movie. Number 1, opening image. So you notice how movies always do an image to either do an establishing shot or something to set the tone or the context of the movie.
So that beat would have been the cover of an old copy of the book Robin Hood that opened up and then had animated illustrations in the book.
Yep. Mm-hmm. That's a classic. And then number 2, which is important because beat sheets vary, but number 2 is theme stated. There's always something like the first 5 to 10 minutes of dialogue where they say what the theme of the movie is.
It's about love. Because it's about how Marion.
No.
Okay. So
no.
Here's the basic premise of the movie: is that Robin Hood, he's a lord, and part of the aristocracy, and he falls in love with this thief who's trying to steal his horse. And he says, I'll just give you the horse because you're beautiful. And they end up falling in love. And then he gets drafted into the Crusades by the Sheriff of Nottingham.
So in other words, they're not going with her being an actual ward that was being taken care of by the king.
Right. There's definitely some twists, for sure. Then he goes to the Crusades and he's at war and he almost gets killed by John. Who you learn later turns out to be Little John, tries to save his son's life after they're captured. He gets sent back off for treason. Somehow John escapes his imprisonment and comes to England, and they meet up. And he decides, I want justice for my son that you tried to save the life of, and you want to get your girl. Let's do this. We're going to steal all the gold.
So let me pause for a moment.
Well, it's really simple. It's after this is simple. He trains them, and then they go on a mission to steal all the gold from the Sheriff of Nottingham, who wants to level the entire city and kill off everybody so that they can take all the money that's there, give it to the crown, and keep a bit for himself so that they can continue the war effort in the Crusades.
So let me actually go over the standard Save the Cat beat sheet. Opening image, setup, expand on the before snapshot, present the main character's world as it is, and what is missing in his life. Theme stated, happens during the setup, what your story is about, the message, the truth. Usually it is spoken to the main character or in their presence, but they don't understand the truth, not until they have some personal experience and context to support it. Catalyst, the moment where life is about to change. Is a telegram, the act of catching your loved one cheating, blah, blah, blah. Debate, but the change is scary for a moment or a brief number of moments. The main character doubts the journey they must take. breaking into two. This is why I cut it there when you were talking about his thing with Little John. The main character makes a choice, and the journey begins. We leave the thesis world and enter the upside-down opposite world of Act 2. The B story, this is where there's a discussion about the theme, negative truth. Usually a discussion between the main character and the love interest, so the B story is usually called the love story. The promise of the premise, that's when Craig Thompson's relationship with Raina blooms when Indiana Jones tries to beat the Nazis to the Lost Ark. When the detective finds the most clues and dodges the most bullets, blah, blah, blah. Then you get to the midpoint where there's a reversal of fortune. Bad guys close in, all is lost, Dark Night of the Soul. Break into 3, choosing Act 3, then the finale, and then the final image, which shows the completed, synthesized world of the story.
Beat for beat.
Yep. That's the standard beat sheet.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that it was terrible. I actually enjoyed it, but I wouldn't say that it was good either. I wouldn't recommend people go flock out to see this. If you want to see a decent telling, a different alternate telling of the Robin Hood story, but then again, there's no real one, version of Robin Hood anyway. Oh, we got video playing.
Nope. This doesn't actually just change me over to the next video and give me the option to the play to not start.
Oh, okay.
Although there's probably a boomer error there, but that's okay because we're gonna scoot right into that here in a minute.
Rabbit keeps fucking up for us every time we try it. But yeah, but it wasn't steampunk. There wasn't things that were just like overly just outrageous. He was really good with the bow and arrow. I don't know how they made the trailer look like it was going to be steampunk because that was not a thing. But I thought the really kind of thing that I thought was a saving grace, at least for me, was the fact that the Friar Tuck was played by none other than Tim Minchin, who you said you had no clue who he was.
No clue who he was until you told me.
Yeah, Tim Minchin is a musician. You probably remember him from such hits as oh shit.
It's Never Gonna Give You Up?
No. No, he did the song had two working titles. One was If You Open Your Mind Too Much, Your Brain Will Fall Out. Nice. The other title of that same song is Take My Wife. He's Take Your Canvas Bags to the Grocery Store. A lot of kind of skeptic themed kind of songs, where he criticizes religion, pseudoscience, that sort of stuff. It's fantastic. He also did the Ginger song. You remember the Ginger song?
Yes. I do remember that song.
Only a ginger can call another ginger. Really, he's a really great musician. And the fact that they put him, an atheist, and very open, avowed atheist who writes songs about atheism and as a friar in this movie was really good. Other than that, though, it's pretty much forgettable, but it was entertaining. I would not suggest. I'd wait for it to come out on the public library. That's my recommendation. I wouldn't even say rent it.
Yeah,
public library it. Yeah.
So, noted a film critic who's gotten some rightful mockery in the YouTube film critic scene. Talked a little bit about Robin Hood and King Arthur movies and why they're a problem.
I want to talk about that too.
So we're gonna follow along on this magical journey that Patrick's gonna take us on. It's gonna be magic.
Okay, on the slate for 2019, we've got one more opening for a tentpole movie. We've already used all available comic books and video games. What do you think?
Maybe it's time we rebooted another PDC. Let's pick something from the hat, shall we? Robin Hood.
Why not? It's been about a decade since the last one.
Wait! Before you make another stupid decision, listen to me.
Is that our shrimp from the break room?
Who are you? Just a man with a question. When was...
He's a man who'll break into an office and eat all your shrimp before throwing you out of a plane.
The last time a Robin Hood movie was a commercial success? I'll tell you, 1991. And how about King Arthur? When was the last time one of those movies did well? 1981. And yet, without fail, every 10 years or so, Hollywood tries again. Last year there was a new King Arthur movie from a major director with a huge budget, and it was one of the biggest flops of the year. So why does Hollywood keep making these movies, even though time and time again, audiences prove that they aren't interested? What's the deal here? To answer those questions, we're going to have to go back to the beginning. Wait, stop, not that far. Okay, that's more like it.
Robin Hood and Little John walking through the forest, laughing back and forth at what the other has to say.
Robin Hood and King Arthur are arguably the two most iconic characters in all of British folklore. Robin Hood's origins date back to the 1400s, while mentions of King Arthur exist in texts from as early as the 12th century. There is some debate about whether or not Arthur was a real king in the Middle Ages, but for the purposes of this video, we'll treat him as a fictional character. Over centuries, they existed in poems and books and legends, and slowly each story became streamlined into generally accepted interpretations.
Also, this is wrong, but we're going to ignore this part where Patrick is completely wrong about the history of English literature and plays, because he does eventually get to a good point.
Okay.
In the 1400s, Sir Thomas Malory reworked the existing stories about Arthur into a single book, Le Morte.
Note, talking about how 200 years later, they reworked everything. And they do that again in another couple hundred years, too.
Arthur. This covered the entire Arthurian legend and became the definitive version of the story from then on. Robin Hood stories existed in countless books, but there isn't really a definitive literary version. It's also notable that unlike the story of King Arthur, which begins with his birth and ends with his death, Robin Hood has no definitive beginning or end. There is less of a clear timeline, as the character simply exists in a collection of stories. So for hundreds of years, these stories were retold in whatever storytelling medium was in style. And when we reach the 20th century, that becomes film. King Arthur showed up in several silent films during the very early 1900s. In 1922, the very first Robin Hood movie arrives, a silent film starring one of the era's biggest stars, Douglas Fairbanks. This was followed in 1938 by The Adventures of Robin Hood, the big-budget, glorious Technicolor adaptation starring Errol Flynn, which remains the most iconic and best-known interpretation of the character. To this day, this is the one that every new version is compared.
Although Errol Flynn and Douglas Fairbanks' versions were very similar from a physical acting standpoint and from stunts and whatnot.
To. King Arthur never quite got a classical adaptation as definitive as the Errol Flynn Robin Hood, but there were enough high-profile film versions that the character remained in the popular consciousness. There were several Arthur films made in the 1950s and 60s, the best known of which is probably 1953's The Knights of the Round Table. This version covers pretty much the full Arthurian legend, from Arthur pulling the sword from the stone through his death. By the 1960s, these stories and characters were so well known that they were deemed worthy to receive the Walt Disney animation treatment. In 1963, Disney released The Sword in the Stone, based on the early parts of T.H. White's The Once and Future King, the definitive 20th century retelling of the...
Also, The Once and Future King is a definitive retelling of Arthur, so anything that talks about Arthur nowadays ends up referencing that and not the original books, which is why I need to incorporate that into our transformative work here.
And by the way, I will also point out that Sword in Stone is good.
Disney's
It is a good one.
Robin Hood reimagined the characters as anthropomorphic animals, which gave generations of viewers weird, confusing feelings about foxes. While neither of these attempts to be complete or even accurate retellings, by nature of them being Disney animated films, to countless generations, they remain the best-known versions. The 60s and 70s also brought two other distinct versions of King Arthur. 1967's Camelot,
also based on White's plays,
the musical version, and 1975's Monty Python and the Holy Grail, the wacky comedy version.
No, on second thoughts, let's not go to Camelot. It is a silly place.
Right. By now, the story was so ingrained in popular culture that it was being interpreted in different genres. And in 1976, there was Robin and Marian, another variation on the Robin Hood story aimed more at adults, telling the story about the characters in their later years. It had been several decades since a classical take on either story, and so we got new ones. John Boorman's Excalibur in 1981 and Robin Hood Prince of Thieves in 1991. Both were grittier, more mature versions. Excalibur in particular, which is a...
Didn't he say that the last time there was a hit movie based on Robin Hood was in 1991? So it's definitely...
Right, that was Robin Hood Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner. Huge moneymaker.
Wasn't Men in Tights also a huge moneymaker?
Not to the extent. It wasn't a hit. it was profitable, but it wasn't like a huge hit.
Okay. I think that's what most people
hard
know.
R-rated movie, but they were still mostly faithful to the original stories. And they were both extremely successful. Like Prince of Thieves was the second highest grossing film of 1991. And that was the last time any of these movies would be a hit. And before you, well, actually me to say that some of them technically made their budgets back, look, crawling to $100 million domestic on a $200 million budget is, by Hollywood studio standards, a disappointment. 2 years after Prince of Thieves, Mel Brooks released his parody, Men in Tights, which flopped theatrically but found new life on home video and cable TV.
Unlike some other Robin Hoods, I can speak with an English accent.
Over the following decades, each would be reimagined multiple times, reflecting the various cinematic trends. So in 1995, there was the King Arthur movie First Knight, which removed anything magical or mythological and was mostly a romantic drama. Then, in the early 2000s, in the wake of Gladiator's success, the characters were reimagined in gritty, realistic versions that discarded almost anything recognizable in favor of the historically accurate, untold stories. This was Antoine Fuqua's King Arthur and Ridley Scott's Robin Hood. And now, they're at it again, this time trying to tap into the success of comic book movies. Last year, Warner Brothers released Guy Ritchie's King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, which took the superhero origin approach and hoped to be the first of a King Arthur cinematic universe that is definitely not happening because that movie flopped hard. Coming this November is a new Robin Hood, which originally had the working title Robin Hood Origins. And yeah, once again, it looks very little like any classic version of Robin Hood and very much like Batman Begins. A couple weeks ago, I conducted a survey on Twitter asking what people's favorite film versions of Robin Hood and King Arthur are, and the results were enlightening. With Robin Hood, the overwhelming winner is the Disney version. Following that is Men in Tights, the comedy version, and then tied for third place are the 1991 and 1938 versions. So only 28% of people said their favorite version of Robin Hood is a straightforward, serious one. That's like 60% of people saying Lego Batman is their favorite Batman movie. No disrespect to Lego Batman, which rules. And with King Arthur, the winner by far was Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Followed by Excalibur, with the Disney version close behind. So while this is an informal survey conducted over social media with only about 150 people responding, some things are clear. With these iconic characters, the most popular versions are either the animated Disney ones or the silly comedy ones. And barely anyone seems to like any version of Robin Hood or King Arthur made in the past 25 years. And that's kind of weird. These are some of the most iconic heroes in all of Western fiction, and in 2018 they're best known as an anthropomorphic fox and a bumbling fool who can't afford a horse.
It could grip it by the husk!
So what's the problem with all the recent versions? They have big budgets and big movie stars, but audiences don't give a shit. But really this leads us to a bigger question, which is that everyone has heard of Robin Hood and King Arthur, but how popular are they really? We're living in the age of the franchise. It's not movie stars that audiences flock to, it's characters. So why don't audiences care about Robin Hood the way they do about Batman? What's important here is that Batman, along with most other prominent comic book characters, maintains a level of cultural omnipresence. There's a constant stream of new comic books being published monthly. There is almost always a Batman cartoon on TV. There are regularly new Batman video games being released. And then, of course, there are the movies. From 1989 to 1997, 4 live-action Batman films were released, then an 8-year gap until the next one, and since 2005, Batman has appeared in 7 theatrically released films. But something like Robin Hood doesn't have that. Imagine you're a 21-year-old. You don't watch many old movies, so you probably haven't seen the 1938 version. Maybe you saw the Disney one as a kid, you probably caught Men in Tights on Comedy Central at some point. No one really talks about Prince of Thieves anymore outside of Alan Rickman's performance. The only Robin Hood movie released in your lifetime is the Russell Crowe version that no one really likes. So odds are that the version you are most familiar with is the one from Shrek.
Please let me introduce myself. Oh, merry man!
See, while Hollywood studios are obsessed with making films based on properties people are already familiar with, it's why they love sequels, there's a difference between something people are fans of and something they've just heard of. That's the thing with comic books. There's an existing fandom the movies can tap into, who will likely turn up to see the adaptation of their favorite characters. But then there's that time they made a Marmaduke movie.
Owen Wilson is Marmaduke.
People are aware
Do you
of
remember
the Marmaduke
that?
comic strip,
What?
but there is no passionate, diehard Marmaduke fan base.
Owen Wilson was Marmaduke. In a live-action Marmaduke movie, that was a thing that happened.
Marmaduke.
That was a thing that happened.
Okay. I'm not familiar with Marmaduke, so.
Well, it's a giant Rhodesian Ridgeback dog.
Yeah, I see it now. I had to scroll all the way through the pictures from the movies in order to get to the actual thing it was based on.
It doesn't exist. And that's the issue with Robin Hood and King Arthur, and really most of these older public domain characters. Audiences are aware of them, and maybe they enjoy various past versions of them, but not many people are going to show up to a King Arthur movie just because it's a King Arthur movie. Awareness is not the same as fandom. It's like that weird time in the early 90s. Batman was a hit, but instead of doing the obvious thing and adapting other popular comic books, Hollywood instead made a bunch of movies about pulp heroes from the 1930s, like The Shadow, Dick Tracy, and The Phantom, that modern kids had barely heard of. And unsurprisingly, most of those movies flopped. So with Robin Hood and King Arthur, Hollywood keeps mistaking awareness with popularity. And here's where they keep making their next mistake. Let's look at Batman again. Christopher Nolan's trilogy is regarded as a radical new take, stripped down, realistic, and grounded. But it still has Bruce Wayne in a bat costume fighting supervillains and driving a Batmobile. It has Alfred and Commissioner Gordon and the Joker. It still matches our mental image of Batman. Over the past 25 years, every version of Robin Hood and King Arthur has opted to do a radical reinterpretation. But they've all been way more radical than what Nolan did with Batman.
The whole take is a very different...
It's an origin story.
We're trying to make a gritty, real film.
It's a really fresh take on the whole thing. It's rock and roll, it's gritty, it's dark.
Here are some of the departures in Ridley Scott's 2010 Robin Hood. Robin Hood is not called Robin Hood. He's also not actually Robin of Locksley. There is no Sheriff of Nottingham. Robin is not an outlaw. He actually fights alongside Prince John, who is not a villain. Robin doesn't live in Sherwood Forest. And instead of stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, he fights with the English army against French invaders.
And
basically,
by the way, there was
other than being about a guy named Robin who uses a bow and arrow, it bears...
It's also worth noting that there was no Prince John in the film as well, and the Sheriff of Nottingham probably wasn't the same Sheriff of Nottingham that was in the original story, but I think there was a new sheriff. Who
There's no resemblance to any previous version of Robin Hood.
At the end of it,
if you look at the original trailer, you'd never guess it was a Robin Hood movie until the title appears at the end, which seems like a problem. In the final 5 minutes of the movie, Robin Hood is declared an outlaw and moves to Sherwood Forest, thus setting up the classic status quo for a sequel that never happened. It's 2.5 hours to finally get to the thing we recognize. And then there's the new one coming out later this year. The title is, once again, Robin Hood, but until last year, the working title was Robin Hood: Origins. That's right, another origin story. It's the same thing with King Arthur. In both the 2004 and 2017 films, Arthur is only crowned king at the very end. These are movies called Robin Hood and King Arthur, in which the characters don't actually earn those names until the final scenes. I think Patton Oswalt covered this pretty well when he said,
"I don't give a shit where the stuff I love comes from. I just love the stuff I love."
Every movie version of Robin Hood and King Arthur in the past 25 years.
So this one was a little bit different because he became Robin Hood very in the second act, like early in the second act. So I think this is a little bit different. A
little bit different, but it's still we don't really care about how he became Robin Hood. We want him robbing.
I cared about how Batman came from, and it probably spent less time focusing on how Robin Hood became Robin Hood.
We can also get into in a moment on how one of the core elements of the Robin Hood mythos is something we don't really look at too critically in our modern age, but I want to go down the rest of this rabbit hole for a moment.
Including the ones currently in development, are radically different takes on the characters. They bear very little resemblance to the classic versions and discard almost all the iconography with which audiences are familiar. But since it's been decades since a classical version of either one, these departures are meaningless. There's a big lesson to be learned here, which is that no one cares about a radical new take if they don't remember the last traditional one. And this doesn't just happen with Robin Hood and King Arthur.
Yep. You can't subvert expectations if people don't have expectations to subvert.
Yeah, and it wasn't as we were going along that I started to realize, like, where's Prince John?
Yep.
Like, it didn't click to me at first. It took me a while to realize, like, oh, yeah, that was a character in Men in Tights. How come he's not in it? And that's not even a classic telling of it. Because I don't even know the story of Robin Hood anymore.
Hollywood keeps trying to make origin stories for other public domain characters. Remember Dracula Untold? Remember Pan? No? Right. That's because no one went to see those movies.
They were
Casino
awful.
Royale and Batman Begins are regarded as bold new takes on those characters, but they still contained all the core elements and iconography that audiences expect. Viewed from a distance, they still pretty much look like any other James Bond or Batman movie. And because the previous installments in each franchise were still fresh in audiences' memories, these new takes had an actual impact. There was something to compare them to. Okay, so the big question here is there any way to make these movies good? Yes, of course. There's a reason these stories have been retold and reimagined over and over for 500 years. They're timeless and flexible, and when done well, they're great. Right now, there are at least 7 Robin Hood movies in various stages of development. There's the gritty origin story coming out this November, one set in the future, one following Marion after Robin Hood dies, one supposedly setting up a shared universe in which each of the Merry Men gets a solo movie, and look, these are all bad ideas. Well, they're not inherently bad ideas, but they're the wrong ideas to do right now.
Right.
Every one of these is trying to be a unique, different take. But what both Robin Hood and King Arthur need are straightforward classical adaptations. You need to remind people why they liked those characters in the first place. Once again, no one cares about your radical new take if they don't remember your last traditional one. The best point of comparison here is another iconic public domain British hero, Sherlock Holmes. In the past decade, there have been 3 major adaptations of Sherlock Holmes. The film series starring Robert Downey Jr., directed by Guy Ritchie, the BBC television series Sherlock, and the CBS series Elementary.
Lame.
Each has its own spin on the material. The movies are more action-oriented, both TV series take place in a modern setting, and Elementary reimagines Watson as a woman. Notably, all 3 have been very successful. If you stack the versions on top of each other, certain elements remain consistent. Whether he's bare-knuckle boxing or sending text messages, in each version, Sherlock Holmes is cold, insufferable, and
Is that Zero cool?
He solves mysteries, faces off against Moriarty, and causes constant frustration for his level-headed friend and partner, Watson. That has always been the core of Sherlock Holmes, and sticking to it has consistently led to both critical and commercial success. Or let's look at another example, Alice in Wonderland. It's a public domain property that's been adapted countless times in different media. Everyone is aware of it. But there is a gap of several decades between major film versions. The most iconic, the Disney animated film, was made in 1951. So in 2010, when Disney was making a new big-budget live-action Alice in Wonderland, while they did make major changes to the text, such as turning it into a sort of fantasy epic, on the surface they kept all the recognizable iconography. Alice in a blue dress, the White Rabbit, the Queen of Hearts, the Cheshire Cat, etc. It looked like the Alice in Wonderland people remembered.
It was garbage.
And it made $1 billion. Just make a movie that has all the things people remember. Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, Camelot, Merlin, the Sword in the Stone, Morgana, and the Lady in the Lake, and all the cool, exciting mythological stuff. Look, I can't believe I'm saying this, but the opening few minutes of...
They're making another Arthur movie, and I saw the trailer for this. No, hey. It's a new take. So it's gonna be new. It's about a boy who stumbles into a construction yard or demolition yard where they're demolishing a building, and there's a sword stuck in a stone, and he pulls it out, and it brings upon this earth of a plague, and it turns out that it was King Arthur's thing, and once he defeats these evil things, he becomes king, and Lady of the Lake appears. Guess where she appears? I'll spoil it for you. In a bathtub after he fills it up with water and calls upon her name. It looks fucking garbage. And I just remembered this while we were watching this. I was like, oh my God, they're doing it again. It's never been. It's endless trash.
Is the closest thing to a proper King Arthur movie in like 30 years. And hey, as Sherlock Holmes in Elementary proved, you can change things like setting or gender and still have it work. Right now, with income inequality as huge and widespread as it is, a modern-day Robin Hood adaptation would actually make a ton of sense. And if you keep all the core elements but just change the setting, I genuinely think it could work. Like, seriously, hire me to write it. I'm very cheap. So, before you guys greenlight another movie that is destined to fail...
So, we're gonna kind of segue in there. Patrick set us up for that. So, why did Robin Hood rob from the rich and give to the poor?
Because the rich weren't necessarily capitalist bourgeoisie people who are exploiting the labor. They were people in league with the government, if not the government, who was stealing people through taxation and was robbing them blind. And not just robbing them blind, but, you know, basically almost it was feudalism, right? And feeding it all to the aristocracy, and they were all living like kings while everybody else was living in squalor. And anytime they had an opportunity to kind of rise up a little bit, they would be taxed out of it.
Now, those were things that got added much more recently. But they were alluding to a very specific moment in English history. So, Prince John was ruling on behalf of his brother, Richard II, who went off to join the Crusades, much like Robin Hood did. Almost like Robin Hood returning is representative of Richard returning. And he was kept as a prisoner for a while. And there was a very large bounty that had to be paid to the Austrians to get him out of jail, which was a very unpleasant tax that the English people had to play upon. So when, you know, the Great Depression rolled around, they were making him a tax rebel who was trying to help out the poor folk. So when he's saying, yeah, with income inequality being a big thing, you know, making Robin Hood about that, yeah, no, you want to get actually a little bit deeper into all that.
Mm-hmm. That could work.
Yeah.
They could totally make an Orange Man Bad thing, and it would work. But they didn't do that with this. But by the way, I am not complaining. I was hoping that it wouldn't turn into Orange Man Bad.
We're not advocating Orange Man Bad.
Yeah.
We never advocate for Orange Man Bad.
I'm just saying commercially that would probably work. Yeah.
So that's another show. So I think once we get... We talked about an idea, and I think we do need to do this. Jim needs to crank down and watch all of the Highlander material, because on another Discord he runs, we're talking about the Highlander properties and how all but one of them were bad, and all but two of them were terrible. And I regaled people with how terrible they were, and my opinions lined up exactly with audience scores from Rotten Tomatoes. They lined up
identically.
Yeah, they were identical. So that might be a little bit of something fun we have in the future. And also, well, I think you kind of need it a little bit. I don't think you completely need to know about Evangelion to be able to enjoy End of Evangelion, which is one of those seminal experiences you have with anime.
Congratulations!
Oh, did I talk about did I talk about Legend of Galactic Heroes last time?
No, I don't think so.
So I watched a pretty epic, legendary, you know, hardcore anime series called Legend of Galactic Heroes, and we're gonna go out on this story because it's one of the most interesting anime series did. It's late 80s, early 90s, so a lot of its animation aesthetic and its storytelling aesthetic comes from that. So it's all about a war between the Galactic Empire and the United Republic, fighting a 150-year human civil war in the galaxy, where there's Space America and hybrid Space Germany and Space Japan. So do you think the show makes Space Germany out to be bad?
Of course.
It doesn't.
Oh, I'm sorry, Japan.
Right, no, but like there's Space Japan because there are elements of Japanese history that are woven in there. They're thinking more for the audience, but there's a lot of things from Prussian and European history. But you have two opposing political forces, one that is clearly authoritarian and kind of a little brutal, and one that's clearly democratic And both are corrupt. Both are kind of, hypocritical towards themselves. But the show doesn't make a value judgment out of either of that.
I don't know which anime you're talking about, so I'm just going to...
It's called Legend of the Galactic Heroes.
Nope, too late. Damn it.
And it's got 160 episodes. And it starts off with a space battle. It actually makes space battles interesting. And in the first space battle, the subordinate to the commanding officer says, we're about to get hosed. We need to withdraw. And he's going, no way. Our battle plan will be completely foolproof. And then everybody gets fucking killed. Blown up and stabbed by space debris. And the main protagonist commander that you see him rise through the ranks, he's a guy who's lazy, who doesn't want to be a soldier, but he had to be a soldier to get an education. And he doesn't like war, so the only reason he fights war is because he wants to get it over with quickly because everybody else is terrible at it. And you see the fact that the...
Are you seeing my general anime picture that I posted up for very little discussion? Okay.
That's pretty good. I like that. That's pretty good there. So, we also see the political corruption going on in democratic society and how the executive council of the government say, listen, yes, this war plan is completely terrible, but if we do it, we'll all win the next election, and then we can figure out how to solve the problem and the collapse of the economy later. Spoiler, they don't, because most of them die.
Oof.
In the democratic society, basically, he was the defense minister, and he later becomes president, has a secret paramilitary group that goes around and terrorizes people who disagrees with him about how great and noble the war is. And on the flip side, the main character for the Space Empire is this guy who was the son of a lower-end noble whose father sold his sister off to sex slavery to the emperor. And he uses that to advance himself into the military and eventually become emperor. And then he dies. Basically, all the key characters that you go, wow, these characters are doing really great things. It's kind of awesome. They all die. It's an anime that focuses both on the great man theory of history, but also all the great men get killed. Without exception.
Okay. Sounds like anime.
Yeah, but it's very different. It's very different than most anime. So that's how we're going to end it. We're going to end that with a little space war.
And then I'm going to play a classic song as the outro. And do you want to pimp your Twitter?
The Twitter is Karasoth.
You want to spell that because that's
Karasoth.
Yep, and then the link is also in the description as well.
Yep.
So.
We also got like, subscribe,
Patreon,
hit the bell icon, click on the Patreon. Because when we start getting monies coming in, we're gonna actually, have Patreon content.
Patreon only episodes that could work.
That can work. Yeah, we want some money.
Hangouts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
and then you can ask me that FNet question on it, and I'll answer it.
Exactly.
This is not the show for that.
We need some bribes. We need some bribes.
Yeah.
And that's another recording in progress. It's time to stop the recording and let the progress go and play on through.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for coming on.
Bye. Ya.
I never pick a side. Nothing ever really would change if I committed suicide. I don't really care for what you claim is wrong or right. That feeling too intelligent to take a stand and fight. Yeah,
This commentary is very obvious and bland, but you can tell how smart I am from my British accent.
Me, an intellectual, picking the lowest fruit. Just to prove how smart I am, though all my points are moved. Look at me, so rational, a skeptic of the times. Wow. Let's debate feminism a few more 100 times.
Hey, guys, did you see that blue-haired SJW over there? What a freak, right? Hey, donate to my Patreon.
All I wanna do is keep you from moving forward. All I wanna do is keep you from moving forward.
Listen, just settle down for a second. Just check this out. I just posted the video. Okay, it's like a 3-hour talk session between me and 10 other people who pretty much share my exact opinion, and it's hardly constructive whatsoever.
Me, an intellectual, so similar to you. Only true enlightenment comes from avoiding truth. What is a conclusion? I've never heard that term. Ideology takes spine, but I'm just a worm. Me, an intellectual, just listen to my voice. Can't you tell I am so right when I don't make a choice? Me, an intellectual, I never pick a side. Nothing ever really would change if I committed suicide.